Good evening and welcome to our virtual Family Council meeting. We're going to review our confidentiality statement. Please refrain from using the name of your loved one. Do not name specific facilities. Please use a nursing home or the personal care home to present to the group. If you need specific assistance, please use the chat feature to state which county you're in, and we will get you connected to your assigned ombudsman. And just a reminder, these calls have public access and are designed for family members and friends of residents in long-term care facilities. Let's review our meeting agenda. We're going to get our virtual meeting tips from Jay, and then we're going to hear from our speakers about the Pennsylvania proposed nursing home regulations. And then to close up the meeting, we'll see what our upcoming meeting topics include. Without further ado, I'll pass it over to Mr. Rotz for our virtual meeting tips.
Thank you, Jamie. For starters, everyone, you've been placed upon entry into mute. We will open the lines in a bit so that you're able to share. If you would like to speak or have a question, please use the raise hand button. Once you raise your hand, we will know to acknowledge you and unmute your line. If you hover your mouse near the bottom of your screen, you'll see the participants tab. That can be expanded if you'd like to see that. The chat feature is at the bottom of the screen as well. Once you maximize it, you'll be able to send questions to the chat moderator or others during the call. Closed captioning is available during this call. To enable that feature, push on the CC icon at the bottom of your screen and choose to enable closed captioning. If you need to step away, you can stop sharing your camera by clicking on the camera icon once again at the bottom of your screen. You can click on it again to start sharing your camera again. And finally, if you have any concerns or complaints, they can be directed to me at the State Ombudsman Office. The telephone number is 717-783-8975, or by email at capital LTC, as in long-term care, -ombudsman, OMBUDSMAN, @pa.gov. And it's my honor this evening to present two luminaries in the area of long-term care advocacy. And with us tonight, we have Kathy Cubit, the advocacy manager for CARIE, and Walz, the supervising attorney for Community Legal Services. And they're here to talk to us about the latest package of Pennsylvania nursing home regulations. Kathy and Pam, welcome to the VFC.
Well, thank you for having us. We appreciate speaking with you this evening, as well as the opportunity that we had before to speak to all of you. And before I get started, I just really want to tip my hat and thank all the state ombudsman office staff for all your hard work and dedication, especially throughout this pandemic. I know it can be a thankless job, but we really appreciate all that you do. Before we get to the content, I'll just speak for a minute about CARIE, and then I'll have Pam speak for a moment about her agency, Community Legal Services. But CARIE is the Center for Advocacy for the Rights and Interests of Elders. We recently updated our full acronym name, and we've been around since 1977. We provide advocacy services for older adults, and we've throughout our history have worked with residents in long-term care facilities, as well as homebound in the community and others. And we're here to help serve as your advocate should you need us for any concern, and our contact information is listed. Next slide, and Pam, take a minute for CLS.
Sure. Hi, I'm Pam Walz. I'm a supervising attorney at Community Legal Services, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be back with you again this afternoon. The organization I work for is Community Legal Services. We are a nonprofit legal aid organization. We provide free legal advice and representation to Philadelphia residents whose incomes are below a certain level. We have a number of different units that handle many different areas of civil law. We don't handle criminal cases, but we handle cases involving housing and all kinds of different civil legal problems. My unit is called the Health and Independence Unit, and we handle cases involving long-term care issues, Medicaid issues, Medicare, SSI, Social Security, and other public benefits. So there's information here about our offices in Philadelphia. We've been doing telephone intake for the past 2 years. Just next week, we're going to start doing some walk-in intake again, in-person intake, and we're excited about that. And so there's information there about where someone would call if they wanted information about that. And our website is there on the slide. And so while we only represent Philadelphia residents, there are legal services programs like ours throughout the state in every area. So each county has a legal services program. One way to find it is by looking up Pennsylvania Legal Aid Network, and you can get information there about the legal services program in your area. And most legal services programs do handle public benefits and to some degree handles cases specifically for older adults and people with disabilities. Thanks.
So I'm going to start our presentation today as we did back when Pam and I spoke with you last year. We want to talk to you about, in general, the regulatory review process in Pennsylvania, as well as the specific set of regulations that we're all concerned about, which is the nursing home regulations. So I'm going to do a high-level discussion of that, and then Pam will get into some of the details that are currently being proposed. So as this slide states, the Pennsylvania Department of Health is proposing new nursing home regulations that have not been updated since the late 90s. And we believe that had stronger regulations been in place and enforced, we would not have had quite the serious outcomes from COVID that occurred and devastated not just residents in Pennsylvania, but all over the country. And a group of advocates formed early on in the pandemic and came up with a set of recommendations that we wanted Pennsylvania to implement immediately to deal with and address some of these preventable issues that were happening. And among what we did was compile a comprehensive set of recommendations to the current regulations. And there's a link at the bottom of this slide. And we use that to advocate with the Department of Health to update the current regulations and take this body of work and include it in as it was updating, the regulations. And with this particular package, we can say they did take a lot of our recommendations, but more to come on that in a moment. So the regulations typically take 2 years once the proposed regulation is released by a state agency like the Department of Health until they're actually, approved and put in place, or it could go through that long process and not be approved. But that's in general, an overview. We'll go to the next slide. So the regulatory review process in Pennsylvania is a little different than some other states, in that we have this body called the Independent Regulatory Review Commission, or IRC, that you may read or hear. And any proposed regulations has to go through this regulatory review process before they could be implemented. And once implemented, these regulations are a lot like laws, in that there are consequences if they're not followed, or there should be consequences if they're not followed. So they're really important in terms of setting standards and consequences for in this case, how nursing homes are operated. So the general process is that once a proposed regulation is released by a state agency, in this case, the Department of Health, anyone in the public can comment within a 30-day window. And so there's a hard 30-day window, and then the state agency has up to 2 years to respond to the comments and make any revisions to what it proposed before issuing its final regulation. The IRC also gives comment usually in about 30 days when the public comment closes of its thoughts to help advise the state agency or the Department of Health in this case. But once it gets to the final form stage and it's released, there is no opportunity to say, well, we like everything, but this part. You either have to support or reject what's being proposed. And that's what happens at this IRC meeting, public meeting, where they review everything and they take thoughts from the public, whether they should approve or disapprove. And you certainly can justify why you want something approved or not approved. But there's no opportunity to change anything at that stage. That's why this proposed stage is so important, because this is the place where we can make improvements to what is being proposed. So usually proposals are all released at one time for this 30-day public comment period. But the Department of Health, and I'm not quite sure why, just broke up the this set of current regulations into 4 packages. And so we're on the 3rd package of regulations at this point. And could you go to the next slide, please? So the four packages, and I'll quickly go through these. The Department of Health will kind of bring them all together and release them in final form all at the same time. And to get back to that final form stage. Since they are breaking up the packages in this unusual way, the Department of Health will take comments on any of the previous packages. So if you missed an opportunity to comment on package 1 or 2, you can certainly submit a comment now with package number 3 with your thoughts on those packages. And the last package, package number 4, not only are we going to want to comment on what's being proposed at that time, but we'll finally, for the first time, see everything together. And we'll want to make sure we comment on the entirety of what's being proposed. And that's what also makes it challenging at this stage. So the first package, and that was when that was released, that was the last time Pam and I were with you, and we spoke about what was in that package. And that really has the most controversial aspect of the whole set of regulations. And that is proposing a minimum number of direct care hours from the current 2.6 hours to 4.1 hours. Now, we could spend the rest of the time here today discussing this issue, but that was all based on research. And we were pleased to see the department include that recommendation. But there was an outcry from the provider side, which often are at odds with what advocates and residents and families want, because they feel with the current staffing shortages and other issues that was not a realistic thing to do. But we all see the consequences when there's not enough staff in facilities. The second package really dealt more with, building and construction standards and updating provisions relating when a facility is closing. And that could be, for, it doesn't happen, thankfully, that often, but when it does, it really needs to be handled very carefully for the residents in terms of who have to move and find another place to live. And the last package, this third package, Pam's going to talk about in a moment. And the fourth package is going to have a lot of critical elements because it's going to talk about nursing services, residents' rights, admissions policies and procedures. So that's going to be another very detailed package that we will be providing comments on, and hopefully you'll invite us back when that comes out to speak with you again. So with that, I'm going to, and then the final form, the department is expecting to release everything in October, but every time they set a date, to be honest, they haven't hit one date yet. So we'll keep our fingers crossed that happens in October. With that, I just want to pause because I know I threw a lot of information out and see if you have any questions or thoughts you want to share before we get into the heart of what's being proposed right now.
I don't see any questions in the chat right this minute, but Jamie said absolutely they're having you back for the additional packages.
Okay, thank you, and thanks, Jamie. So with that, I think we can go to the next slide, and I'll turn it over to Pam.
Okay, so this particular package has a couple of areas. A couple of areas are covered by this set of the proposed regulations that we particularly wanted to focus on and talk with you about. The first of those are regulations concerning what the department does when it gets an application from an operator to who's seeking a license to operate a nursing home, or where they are seeking to there's a change of ownership where a nursing facility is going to be purchased by another operator, and that operator is seeking to get a license to operate the facility. And the current regulations that have been in place since the late 90s don't really have a lot about that. It basically just says that if you want to operate a nursing facility, you need to turn in an application. And it doesn't have a lot of detail about what it is that the Department of Health, the current regulations provide that you turn in an application, and then the Department of Health, which regulates nursing homes, reviews that application and makes a decision on it. But there's not much in the regulations about that process or what the Department of Health should be looking at in deciding whether this applicant is one who is responsible and has a good history and seems likely to provide quality care to residents if they're given a license to operate a nursing home. And in fact, what we've seen is that the application process has been something of a rubber stamp, where when the department gets applications, either from someone who's seeking to open a nursing home or for someone who wants to take over a nursing home and start operating it. They tend to all get approved, really regardless of the history of that operator and whether their previous history operating other nursing homes indicates that they're going to be responsible operators of this new facility. And so when we submitted recommendations to the department for these proposed regulations, this is one of the areas that we really focused on, because it's very important at the front end to make sure that the department is only giving the right to operate nursing homes, giving them a license to operators who appear likely to not have a lot of problems. And so we don't want them giving licenses to operators who have a bad track record in other states or in Pennsylvania. I see, and so, sorry, I was distracted because I see there's a question here. Maybe we'll hold off on that for now. And so we're especially concerned about that because in the recent years, and really increasingly, we've seen a lot of sales of nursing homes. And in particular to private investors and to, in particular to investors who are sometimes called private equity investors. And these are investors that don't necessarily have a background in healthcare, but rather they're investors who are looking for a company to invest in where they can make money. And in many cases, they're looking for a company to invest in where they can make money in the short term, make money quickly for themselves and for other investors who join them. And this goal of making as much money as possible can very much be at odds with the goal of providing quality care to people in nursing facilities. And so it's really important that the department look carefully at applicants to make sure that that they're not giving licenses to operators who are seeking to make short-term profits at the expense of nursing home residents. So as I was saying, some of these operators have very little background in healthcare, and since their goal is to make money, and often it's to make money quickly, there are a number of things they do to try to maximize their profit that tend to make money for them while not necessarily providing good care for residents. So one thing that they tend to do is to, first of all, to sell the real estate underlying the property. So they'll buy a nursing home. It owns, the facility comes with the land, the facility comes with the building, and the company that owns it, that now owns it, will sell the land. But they won't sell it to a third party. They will transfer the ownership to another entity that the owner also owns. They really own both of these companies. And now they will turn around and charge the nursing home rent, which has to be paid to the other company, which they also own, that owns the land and the building. And often this rent is set at a very high level. So now they are making money by charging high rents to the nursing facility. The nursing facility now needs to take more of the money that it has coming in from Medicaid, Medicare, whatever the payment source. It now needs to spend more of that money paying rent that it didn't have to pay before. That means that there's less money left to provide care for residents, but there's more money being made by the operator since it's charging that rent as well. Similarly, these kinds of operators will also set up a bunch of other different kinds of companies that provide different kinds of services. And they will have those companies, which again they own, provide different services to the nursing facility. And they will make the nursing facility pay those other companies for those services. So for instance, they might set up one company that provides management services to help manage the nursing home, and another to do the laundry for the facility, another to provide the food, or to provide physical therapy, or to do the housekeeping. And so the nursing facility is now paying each of these other companies to provide these services. And again, it ends up costing more generally than it would have were the nursing facility just doing this for themselves with their own staff. And this is money that is going to these other companies and in turn into the pockets of the owner who owns all of these different companies. But what this ends up looking like is though the nursing facility itself has very little money because it's spending all of its money on rent and all of these other services. And so when you look at the facility, the owner can say, look, this facility barely has any money. We're not making any profit at all. And so, but that really is obscuring the fact that money is being made by a lot of these operators. Another consequence of this is of there being very little money left in the facility is that the operator will often then seek to cut staff. They're trying to reduce costs in order to maximize their own profits. And what they often do is either cut staff, reduce staff wages or benefits, or turn to less skilled staff who will be less expensive for them. And when they do this, this results in a deterioration of care because there are fewer staff people to take care of residents, there are fewer skilled staff people to take care of residents. And this is a model that we've seen play out over and over, both in Pennsylvania and all over the country. And there's a lot of concern about the effect on the quality of care in nursing facilities and the effect on residents. There's been a lot of this activity happening because even though we have heard from nursing facilities through even before the pandemic that they don't receive enough funding, and certainly during the pandemic, we have heard that nursing facilities are struggling. All the same, these investors continue to find nursing homes very attractive to purchase and to operate because they are making money. And so we've seen a lot of activity around this. And more, when facilities are sold, it's these kinds of operators who are coming in and buying up nursing facilities. And all of this happens in a way that is not at all transparent to the public or to residents or families or staff. And so often these transactions are not known to people who are affected until after it has occurred. And so staff are finding out after the sale has happened. Residents and families are finding out, well after it's happened. And then there's really nothing to be done about it, and everyone has to deal with the consequences of the new ownership. We have seen, as a result of these changes of ownership, facilities that formerly had good quality of care, had good Medicare star ratings, go way down in quality. Start to experience much more in the way of quality of care problems and have their Medicare star ratings decreased. The other thing about this particular model of ownership is that these types of operators, I was talking before about how they'll have different companies to do different things, one to own the real estate and other services, but they also have lots and lots of other corporations kind of between the actual people who own all of this and the nursing facility itself, all of which makes it very difficult to tell who even owns the nursing facility. If you look to see in a lot of cases who the owner is of a nursing facility, what you will see is, if the nursing home is called, Shady Meadows, it'll be Shady Meadows LLC. That does not tell you anything about who actually owns it. There may be some information about the major investors, but you can't really tell a lot about who the company is who ultimately owns it. The other thing that this does when you have a lot of these sort of very complicated corporations between the owners and the facility itself is that it insulates the actual owners from having to pay if there's a lawsuit. Only the corporation that holds the nursing home is probably going to end up having to pay for it. And as we saw before, it probably doesn't have much money. All the money is getting pulled out and sent to the owners. And similarly, if there's an enforcement action that results in a fine, the actual owners, because they are so far removed in terms of the corporate entities, they're not likely to have to pay it either. And it also just makes it there's just a complete lack of transparency for the public. We know that there are nursing facilities which start to experience quality of care problems after sale. We don't really know exactly who owns them. It can be very, very difficult to tell. So are there any questions so far in the chat that I should answer now?
There's a few questions so far. Peg was asking if there's any differences in the regulations between the small independent traditional residences over the facilities that belong to corporations and networks.
No, there's in general, these regulations apply to all facilities that are licensed as nursing facilities. It certainly wouldn't apply to a personal care home or assisted living, but it would apply to nursing facilities regardless of whether they are for-profit, not-for-profit. There are some differences in the regulations, but in general, it'll apply to both. However, some of these protections are things that it shouldn't be too difficult, actually, for the smaller traditional and nonprofit providers. You know, they're not sort of seeking to obscure this information that we're trying to make public. And if they have good track records, these changes in facility licensure policies are not going to be a problem for them. This is really intended to help us prevent providers coming in who are not going to be responsible providers, and they tend to be. They're not the small independents and not by and large the nonprofit operators.
Eileen brought up a point that she said it seems some of these operators are simply flipping nursing homes like some people flip houses.
That's really it. That's right. And the other analogy I keep thinking of is like chop shops for cars. When cars are stolen, there's these places called chop shops that basically take them apart and sell all the pieces individually. And that also feels like a good analogy to me, because they're basically taking what was an entity that had land and a building and operations, and they're sort of breaking it apart into pieces and selling each piece for as much as they can get for it. And at the end, they're leaving what is often just a kind of a shell behind. Kathy, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I just want to add, so it obviously impacts residents, families, and the communities where these facilities are. And they come in and once these devastating changes go into effect and everything, the assets are stripped, it really leaves a hole for, people. Do they then, if they're even able, oftentimes they can't get to another facility or transfer to a facility that provides better care because of either distance or, availability. People tend to want to be close to loved ones or in their, communities. And, so this really is, as Pam had mentioned earlier, this needs to be addressed to prevent this from happening. And we're seeing it more and more and more. It's really frightening because we're going from bad to worse. And so it's really important. I'll just give a quick example of one of these companies is called Skyline, and they were operating out of a pizza shop in New Jersey. And they bought properties in Pennsylvania and in other states. And we had a couple properties they bought in Philadelphia, and CARIE serves as the local ombudsman for half of Philadelphia and Montgomery County. But at the time, the facilities they took over provided, they were important parts of the community and places people felt comfortable having their family members go if that type of care was needed. And almost instantly, the staffing decreased, the quality of care decreased, they were discharging people inappropriately. So it really, again, went bad very quickly. And so it's important that we stop this. So I just wanted to add that point.
By the end, at one of the Skyline facilities in Philadelphia, the facility couldn't make payroll, and they didn't have basics like toilet paper and other things, and the staff who were concerned about the residents were actually buying some of these things themselves and bringing them in. And ultimately, the State Department of Health had to take over the nursing facility for a period of time. So next, oh, and there's a hand raised, Lisa. Lisa Davis? Oh, you're muted. Yeah.
Am I unmuted now?
Now I can hear you.
I have a question, is why is the government not doing something about the facilities if they're so hidden, or we don't know who the owners are? Why is not the government doing something about it?
That's a great question. There are efforts going on. I think that these proposed regulations are the beginning of an effort to do that. I believe that there's been legislation introduced in various states, and I believe that there shortly will be some legislation introduced in our legislature as well that is intended to create more transparency. And the Biden administration actually mentioned this President Biden actually mentioned this in State of the Union address. He said that one of the things that they were planning to work on were problems around nursing facility quality of care. In particular, he referenced these kinds of investors, and the Biden administration has unveiled a package of reform proposals that include trying to address some of these problems.
Well,
So
when there is a problem in a facility of neglect and abuse, as we've been hearing forever now, how come they are not listening to the people? Why is it like swept under the rug?
We definitely need good enforcement of the regulations we have. I mean, there are a lot of really good regulations in place about what facilities are supposed to be doing. I think the big problem is that they're not enforced in the way that they should be. And I think that one of the things that the Biden administration is aiming to do is to improve enforcement, something that we're pushing for here in the state, to try to get our Department of Health to do a stronger job enforcing the regulations that it has. But I think that it's really important to keep telling the state and the federal government about these problems so that they can't say they don't know about this. And Kathy just put the information about the federal government, the Biden proposal, into the chat. Okay, next slide. I should go on and explain what the regulations will do about this. So, seeing these problems, we sent long recommendations to the Department of Health about how we felt that they should amend their licensing regulations to address this. And we were very happy they actually adopted in this area a lot of what we suggested. And so the proposed regulations would add criteria for the Department of Health to look at in deciding whether to approve or deny a new license. So there would be some standards that they would be required to look at in deciding whether to give a license, rather than just have it be a matter of paperwork crossing your desk. Oh, they filed the application. Yes, we'll approve it. Instead, these regulations will require the Department of Health to look at particular things, and specifically, it will require them to look at the past performance of the applicant. You know, were there quality of care problems in other facilities that this operator ran, either in Pennsylvania or in another state? Did they get into regulatory problems and have enforcement action have to be taken against them? Did they deliver good quality of care or poorer quality of care? Do they have the financial and the organizational capacity to run a nursing facility? Part of what happened with Skyline was that it was just way overextended. They expanded massively out of this office over a pizza shop in New Jersey very quickly into owning many, many nursing homes in many, many states. And they just got way overextended really fast. And that was probably predictable what happened, which was that they collapsed. And so the Department of Health will be required to look at these criteria. And this will be good because it will make them look at these things. And also then, if they deny a license and an applicant appeals, it will enable the department to look to point to these criteria and say, well, here's the standard that we were looking at, and here's how you failed to meet the standard, so that they can defend that if there is a contest about it. Another good thing that we're hearing from the department is that they're planning to hire additional staff to do real investigation of these applicants. And like we said before, it can be really hard to tell who actually even the proposed owner is. It's a little like forensic detective work. And so we're really happy to hear that the department is planning to hire several people to really delve into these applications when they get them. Take a look at who these operators are, and surface information that's needed to make a decision about whether this is an entity that ought to get a license or not. The other piece of this that we had recommended, I mean, we think it's really important that there be criteria. We were really glad that that's in the proposed regulations. The other thing that we had recommended, though, was that an applicant, that when an applicant applies for a license, that the public be given notice of that. And it can be done in different ways. It could be done by the applicant. It could be put in, or the information can be shared by the department, but that the public be given notice that, X, Y, and Z company is applying for a license to operate a particular nursing home. This will give, this will provide that information to residents, to families, to advocacy organizations, to employees and others, so that they will know, they will be taken by surprise, and so that they can do their due diligence, and if they are concerned, if there are concerns about an applicant's past performance elsewhere, so that they in turn can, the other piece of this that we are asking the department to have is both public notice and also a comment process. And that can, again, could look different ways. It could be an actual hearing, or it could just be the ability of people to be able to send in written comments saying, I have heard, I want to bring to your attention that in New Jersey, this operator, ran this nursing home, and these things happened there, and I'm really concerned about it. And I want to recommend that you not approve it, so that the public can weigh in on it, and the department has as much information as possible in making these decisions. It's just really, these facilities are too important and have too much of an impact on the people who live and work there for there not to be transparency about who owns them and changes of ownership. It looks like we got a couple of additional questions here.
Yes, there's a question. It says, does an applicant pay a fee for the license that is lucrative to the Department of Health?
They do pay fees for the license. They are, as Kathy said, they're minimal. They're not, it's not lucrative at all. They haven't, it's in the statute, hasn't been changed in decades. It's not very much.
And then there was a few other comments. Someone wrote that they were fearful of that. I'm fearful that some of these owners will create ghost owners if they are found unsuitable just to get back into the business, like an absentee landlord.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. And certainly there have been a lot of efforts to kind of obscure who the actual owners are. I mean, so one thing that we have seen is operators putting, having like their wives who are not really in the business or other family members, you know, like, oh, now you're a 5% owner, just sort of giving it to other people. And so that is part of what we need the department to be able to do, is to really understand who is in effect really running this, and whether they are, you know, a front for an entity that is not qualified to have a license. But I think that's part of why it's great that we will have a unit really delving carefully into who these operators are.
Lisa Davis has her hand up. Do
Okay,
you want to
Lisa?
unmute?
Oh, I think you're still muted.
Does our government know who these owners are?
No, you know, I think it is as difficult for the government as anyone else. I think that the federal government leaves licensing decisions by and large to the states, and I think that it's difficult for the states to tell who the owners are. That's part of what our Department of Health is preparing to do, is to get better information on that and more person power to look into that so that they will know it. At the federal government level, I don't think they really keep track of those things. But again, there are some reforms that are planned at the federal level to increase transparency.
Oh.
If I could just add, I mean, years ago, facilities were owned and operated as some are today by faith-based organizations and businesses that are in the business of running facilities or other healthcare types of facilities. So this is a phenomena that's not only happening in nursing facilities, it's happening in hospitals. It's starting to happen in hospice programs. It's starting to happen in, I was reading an article the other day, in private practices, of physician private practices. The list is going on and on. And so I think, to your good point, Lisa, that the government has been a little asleep at the wheel on this, and they've got to get caught up, because it's going to have devastating impact, not only as we see in nursing facilities, but in other aspects of our healthcare system. I'm sorry, Pam, I apologize for cutting you off.
No, it's okay. The public and notice comment process that we recommended was not included in the proposed regulations, and we are going to we are commenting to the department again, asking them to include this process. And so that's one of the things that we would really encourage you to think about including in your comments, should you choose to comment on the regulations. Next slide. The other area that this package of regulations covers is infection prevention and control and emergency preparedness. And of course, nothing could have been clearer in the last 2 years than the importance of having effective infection prevention and control in nursing facilities, and having good emergency preparedness systems. What these regulations do is so there are federal regulations concerning infection control, and emergency preparedness. And what the regulations do is something that they've done in a number of areas, which is basically to say, we adopt the federal regulations and we're not going to have any other Pennsylvania regulations about it. People just have to follow their federal regulations. And, and in any case, nursing facilities have to follow the federal regulations. It's just a question of whether Pennsylvania is going to add on additional protections on top of that. And we think that there are some areas in which Pennsylvania should have additional requirements over and above what the federal regulations contain. One thing that the proposed regulations would do is to add bed bugs to the list of conditions that has to be reported. That seems like a good idea. But they propose to delete entirely the current section that deals with disaster preparedness and instead just to default to the federal regulations. And what we are recommending is that instead that section should be expanded to include various types of emergencies, disasters, and pandemics. And what we are recommending the department to require is that each facility have a written plan that would address each of these kinds of emergency events, and that they submit that with their license application when they apply for it, and then annually each year for approval with the Department of Health, so that we can know that facilities have a plan ready to go in the event that there is another pandemic or some other kind of disaster or emergency. Next slide. I'm going to turn it back over to Kathy.
So before I'm being mindful of time, I'm just curious if anyone on this meeting today, if you have a family member or have experienced one of these ownership changes that Pam was discussing, and if you'd be willing to share that. Okay, well, again, I know usually if someone's gone through this experience, they have a lot to say. So I just wanted to make sure if there was someone that wanted to share that you were given that opportunity to do so. So we only have a few minutes left. And so I want to go through how you can help if you're so inclined to make a difference. And again, every voice really can help make a difference in this, because as much as it seems like this makes sense and it's necessary, especially on the heels of the pandemic, and I noticed a comment about how too many have died, we need to do better. And we are getting pushback from nursing facilities that have they prefer not having too many regulations and being more free to handle things the way they want to handle them. So if you can, submit a comment either or share this information and encourage others to get involved, we appreciate your support. I do want to point out, when you make a comment, that the instructions are in these slides. It gets posted exactly as you send it to you'll either send it to the Department of Health or to the IRC that we mentioned before. So it'll include your name and any other identifying information. And as the webinar began, if you don't want to talk about identify your loved one by name or a facility, you just need to be mindful. It will be posted. If you can share your name, you can submit anonymous comments, but if you can share your name, that helps saying, I, Kathy Cubit, am on record as supporting what these regulations are that are being proposed. So we have outlined here, and again, because of time, I'm not going to read these, but anytime you're commenting, if you can emphasize that we need these regulations and we need them now, That's a universal theme in all of these packages, and certainly in the final package. And again, we talked about some of these other bullets, but the last bullet I'll go to say that if you can share without personal information what your experience, or if you're talking to someone that says, oh yeah, my mother's facility was sold to one of these operators, if they can say what happened, that would be helpful to share. Your local state senators and representatives are hearing from providers that do not want these regulations to go through. So if you happen to be talking with them, you can certainly voice to say you really hope that they'll support when these regulations come up for final form, that they get passed and put through. And we will have on CARIE, this webpage that I have here at the bottom, and through our social media, we're finalizing, we are going to be putting together very detailed comments that we're finalizing now, and that will be posted and shared, as well as some advocacy toolkits that will be developed, any day now. So that's a good place for you to go if you're interested in getting that information. Next slide. Here is the final date. It's a hard date, April 18th. I believe that's Easter Monday. And you can submit either to the Department of Health or to the IRC, Independent Regulatory Review Commission, as listed here. If you send to one, they automatically send it to the other. You can send it to both if you want, but sending it to one, the other they reciprocate and make sure the other gets that information. And as stated earlier, you can comment on previous package. So if you really feel strongly about staffing or something else we mentioned that was in an earlier package, you can include it with your comments this time around. And I think with that, that's our last slide other than questions. But I know we are, oh, thank you. I'm sorry, Jamie. This is a quick screenshot of the Independent Regulatory Review Commission's page of regulations. And the link is earlier in the slides. And you can see all the key dates, and you can see the public comment. As they receive public comments, they get posted on this page for anyone to retrieve and see. I apologize for that. I'm looking at the clock. But anyway, and I believe that's our last slide before any final questions. I'm not sure what else popped into the chat.
You answered the one question about the public commenting period. Someone had a question about that. Carol did. And then there was a round of applause given for vetting the applicants, especially with public notice. Someone is in favor of that. So put that in the chat. So that's good to hear as well. And then there was some different comments about different House resolutions. And then also, let's see here, another comment just came in. There was 2 different comments of thanks for everything for the presentation tonight. And I will just say personally, I'm working as a chat moderator tonight, but I am a family member of a loved one in a nursing home, and their nursing home is going through the sale process right now. So it will be interesting to see, follow everything, and all the things that you both presented tonight are it's very valuable to hear. So thank you to you both.
You're welcome. And I certainly hope it goes well. Not every sale results this way, but it is a trend we're seeing. And again, if you're involved with these calls, you know the good work of the Ombudsman program, and everyone's got to be, as I think was mentioned earlier, a lot of things go on, not responded to. So we all have to do advocacy in every way that we can.
Yes, I'm very thankful for the Ombudsman program, but yes, I'm hoping that the sale will go well and it won't be complicated or anything like that. So, but it's good to hear these things to, things to look out for. So, yep. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Pam. We appreciate all your information. We'll be putting all of this up on our Facebook page with links that everyone can follow to get their comments in. And we'll also send out, the PowerPoint with the links. Jay will provide those for you tomorrow, hopefully before lunchtime, if everything goes well. So thank you so much. And we will just review our upcoming meeting topics. So to round out April, we're going to hear from our peers. So that would be Pennsylvania's Empowered Expert Residents. We're going to have a panel of residents for EU on April 19th, and they have some wonderful questions prepared about what it looks like in their facility now, what they would like to do going forward. And just a reminder, we do not have a meeting on May 3rd. So where whole state office staff is off on assignment. So we're gonna take a 5 for that week. But we have a very good lineup we're planning with the work group. And as always, thank you so much for attending. If you have any specific concerns or complaints, please contact the State Ombudsman Office at 717-783-8975, or you can email Jay at ltc-ombudsman@pa.gov. And thank you so much, everyone. Have a great evening.